Hey, everybody, what is going on? Welcome. It is the Friday edition here of the Roto Grinders Daily Fantasy Fix podcast. We are presented to you by our friends over at FanDuel.com. I, of course, am Dan Bach, Mr. DB730. And again, if you haven't checked out FanDuel, great weekend to do it, great night to do it if you're playing NBA hoops. Looking at their lobby today, I know they've actually got a lot of satellites coming up for $1 million tournaments in the next week or so at varying buy-in price points. Man, super tilty. Finishing third in a winner-take-all $1,500 ticket qualifier, and you lose to E. Hafner. It's one thing to lose to E. Hafner, but he had Terry Rozier in his lineup. Jeez, that's tilting. But congrats to him. But that's just one of the big $1 million tournaments they've got coming up next week, including the Slam. But tonight you've got a $200K Slam, a $350 in the shot, the Monster at $150K, and these tournaments are going to fill probably relatively early. So let's raise those prize pools a little bit there, FanDuel. But what I have to give them a lot of credit for is single entry contests. They've really pushed the envelope on them this NBA season with a 25K single entry, a 25K 3-entry max, 20K $2 buy-in single entry. So they have really been pushing that angle. So if you're into the limited entry tournaments, FanDuel is certainly a great spot for that. Obviously, today we're going to look more at basketball because it's a really good slate for you. We've got piles of NFL content out there here on Roto Grinders on the podcast. Attention here to NBA on this Friday night. And joining me today on the podcast, we're missing Mr. McGiblets, but we do have Hoop 2410, Mike Petta. What do we think Tony is doing right now? You know, he was supposed to join us Monday and Friday, or Wednesdays and Fridays. What do we want to think that he's doing right now?
I'm guessing that he's sleeping. That would be my guess. But someone needs to get his butt out of bed, missing out on this podcast. We'll see if we can live up to the hype. I know it's hard to fill the shoes of Big T these days, but we'll see what we can do here, right?
Yeah, I know. He might just be in a little bit of embarrassment after his Anthony Davis call last time on the show, which Davis must have been listening because he only lit it up for about 95 fantasy points, almost a triple digits on DraftKings. Freaking
Tony was really concerned with that interior defense of the Denver Nuggets. He didn't want anything to do with Anthony Davis for that reason, but I think you and I had a different take. So maybe that's why he didn't show up. Maybe he's a little embarrassed.
Yeah, well, he'll, he's probably counting his giblets somewhere right now. But we are going to attack this slate. Before we do, though, I want to actually just talk a little bit of NFL this week. And I actually brought this up in an interview I did with Matt Kalish over at DraftKings yesterday. I listened back to that on the podcast. But, the salaries hoop are just – we're going to see it again this week. I mean, the lineup build is we'll tell you right now, this is no secret. It's going to be Devontae Booker. It's going to be Julio Jones. It's going to be Mike Evans. And then you can probably choose between a Spencer Ware or a Devontae Freeman. And it's going to come down to which quarterback you like, which tight end you like, and you're probably playing the Broncos defense. I mean, it's frustrating, man, to see that we're just being drawn to the same plays again this week.
Yeah, it's super frustrating. I mean, best case scenario, you're looking at a 4v4 with basically anyone that knows what the hell they're doing. Everyone's going to have those guys you mentioned. It's going to come down to RB2. It's going to come down to quarterback, tight end, and your defense. Everything else just falls in place. The lineup builds itself. It's super frustrating, but I think the best take on it was Maki Supa. Andrew Wiggins came out and just said, price these replacement running backs as if they're starting. So, if you got CJ Anderson at 6.2K, have Devontae Booker 6K, and it eliminates the problem. It's hard to predict injuries in the NFL, but it's no secret at this point, backup running backs tend to do just about as good as the primary running back. So when they come in with these bargain prices like Booker this week at 3.7K, 80, 90, 100, it has to be close to 100% this week. I mean,
he was, I think, on Fantasy Aces, which is one of the sites which just shows obviously the ownership. I think he was like 80% owned in tournaments or something, which is insane. And you're like foolish if you fade it, but because he's in such a good spot and he's so cheap and he gives you everything else, and especially on a week like this where we've got a limited number of games. but it's just like it just doesn't make for good gameplay. And I don't have a problem. Like, I think running back is different than wide receivers. Like, you can still keep your lower priced wide receivers there, the backup wide receivers, because if a stud drops off, that doesn't necessarily mean all the production is going to the guy who the next guy stepping up. But with running back, it almost certainly does. And I agree with you. I think that solution, or that proposal that he put forth, especially for running backs, like, who cares if he's if you've got an expensive backup? Nobody's playing him anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the whole thing. And it's just the running back position. I think that's led to it so many times this season where, everyone wants to get the pricing out early. And I understand that they have to fill these big tournaments, and it makes a ton of sense. But it leads to these issues, and it's specifically with the running back position. I mean, every week you go ahead and you get one of these 3K to 4K running backs that's just in an elite spot that's going to get 20 plus carries, and then the rest of the lineup builds itself. So hopefully we can get this fixed moving forward. But I like that proposal from Maki Supa.
If you were playing tournaments this week, and we say the big chalk this week's Booker, Evans, and Julio. If you're going to play a big tournament this week, and you're going to take a stand against one of those three, which one would it be?
Booker. Wow. Because there's a lot of really good running backs out there this week. I mean, there's 6 or 7, even 8 guys, I think, in really, really good spots. And, Booker's the guy that I'd probably go ahead and take the stand against for that reason.
He's probably going to have the higgest ownership out of all those guys as well. Too, so yeah. that kind of helps you a little bit on the game theory front. And we'll see. Maybe we've been saying it. Is this the week the chalk doesn't hit? I don't know. I mean, we'll see. This might be the chalkiest week we've had. So we'll find out. But
there's going to be some angry people. These chalk faders are not happy at this point in the NFL season. So if they don't get a bone here at some point, things could get nasty for them.
No doubt. All right, let's get to NBA here on this Friday night. I like these little schedules here that are kind of middle of the road, not 13 games or whatever. Looks like we're about 8 here tonight. We'll kind of go position by position as we did last show on Wednesday. I think that went pretty well, and kind of give you our thoughts. We're going to use FanDuel pricing as a reference since they're our fine sponsor here of the podcast. And we'll start, obviously, on the high end. We've got Russell Westbrook here at 12K. He didn't disappoint at all last game. Kind of got a little bit slow out of the blocks, but still nearly finished with a triple-double. I think the final total was 32, 12, and 9. Didn't even get a single steal or block, which I think is pretty much of an anomaly because he's going to get more of those. Or more often than not, he's going to have a handful of those each game as well. So that was good for like 57 fantasy points, which was nice. Wasn't Anthony Davis, but it was really nice.
Seriously, it felt like his floor. Like you said, he came out of the gates like slow, and like it was like a ho-hum performance. Didn't do anything crazy, like you said. Didn't get any steals, any blocks, and like he still got like 57 fantasy points. It's just crazy.
But our problem is today, like you look at the salaries here, especially at point guard, you've got Russell Westbrook at 12K, and we've got Steph Curry at 9,000, which, let's face it, his role is a little bit different now since Durant's come over. But that's probably about one of the lowest salaries I can ever remember for him over the last year and a half.
Yeah. It's a good price tag on him. And just like looking at the slate, I know it's early on and, neither of us are settled in on any sort of guy, but this seems like the exact same slate as like Wednesday night. It looks just like it. We have Westbrook and Harden in elite spots. Anthony Davis is there in an elite spot. And then, the matchups seem the same for these guys. But, at point guard, you got Westbrook at 12K. You got Curry at 9K. You have to imagine the Warriors are going to come out with a much, much better performance tonight opposed to opening night when they just got manhandled by the Spurs. So, it's different in the fact I don't think the standout values are there, so it's harder. On Wednesday night, you could have feasibly played all three top guys. You could have worked in Westbrook, Harden, and Anthony Davis, and some people did, and obviously that worked out really well. Today, I just don't think there's a feasible route there because the values just aren't as plentiful as they were on Wednesday night.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that's kind of the problem that I'm looking at in terms of my first kind of starting to build some lineups here. And that's why, it's weird because you said it best the other day. I'll pay, it feels like Westbrook could be a 14K player and I'll play him. But he also feels like, he's 3,000 more than Steph Curry. He's almost 11 or 1,200 more than Anthony Davis here. He's 700 more than James Harden. So it doesn't sound like a lot over Harden and Davis, but like you mentioned, the values aren't quite as good today. Yeah. So that little bit of savings can go really a long way. And, I look at some of the options at point guard that we have here. We already talked about Curry, and I was bringing up his numbers against New Orleans last season, and he was pretty freaking awesome. 59 FanDuel points, 77 FanDuel points, and 43. He had a 53 burger on the road last year in New Orleans. So, and Tim Frazier's far from a great defender either. So I think I agree. I think it's a bounce back spot, but it's also hard to know where that's going to be. But look in this middle tier. We've got Kyrie Irving still underpriced here at 7,500. And in that same matchup, you got Kyle Lowry, I think, who feels a little bit underpriced as well at 7,700. Lowry, he was terrible in that opener, but he also shot, I think, 3 for 13 or something from the field, which we're not going to see more often. So, when you look down, you've got Kyrie Irving at not half price of Russell Westbrook, but not that far off.
Not that far off.
And that's craziness.
Yeah. I like this tier too. The one guy I might leave off is Bledsoe just because he only played 29 minutes. I did like him a little bit more, but opening night, a lot of question marks. And I think we kind of said that when we were going through the podcast. There was a lot of question marks opening night of NBA. The fact he only played 29 minutes, I'm not sure if that's because they were kind of getting blown out or what. Have to wait and see. I want him to play, into the 30s. But Kyrie at 7.5K, he looked so good opening night. I know that's Tony's boy, and Tony loves him, and Tony's not here to talk about him. I'm sure he'd have some very kind words, but he looked really good, on the verge of unstoppable in that third quarter. I know they're going against the Knicks, and Lowry is a much better defender, but take all that into account. I think 7.5K is still much too cheap for Irving tonight.
Yeah, I'm with you too. Everything that you said there. I mean, 7.5 is cheap, and Lowry going against Irving, who is a bit of a turnstile defensively. We've seen in the past at only 200 more. I mean, again, I think they might fall into tournament plays more for me. But if you wanted to differentiate and go more fair and balanced, from top to bottom of your lineup, those guys are absolutely in play today. Let's move down to the kind of lower tier, and there's 3 guys that stand out for me, and it's Tim Frazier at 5,300, George Hill at 6,100, and I'm going to throw Jeremy Lin in there as well at 6,200. Now, that Brooklyn team, they really spread out the minutes last game, so I'm probably not looking to go there in cash, but I still think he's probably one of their best offensive players that they have, and that's kind of what you're looking for, but 6,200 is probably not cheap enough for me to kind of pull the trigger there. But I think the real question is Hill versus Frazier tonight. What's your thoughts on those guys?
Love both those guys a ton. George Hill looked really good opening night in that matchup against Portland. Now gets an equally good matchup here against the Lakers. 6.1K, played 39 minutes opening night. That's a big number. I know there was some thought that what's it, Axum is or whoever the backup is might dig into his role a little bit. That wasn't the case. He's the guy that's going to be running this offense. He looked damn good, and I like him a lot at 6.1K. And then Frazier, he's too cheap, 5.3K, coming off the big performance there. Played 37 minutes. That's also a very nice number there. One guy that I like for tournaments in the same price range as Lynn is Ish Smith. I think he bounces back a little bit here. He's 6.2K, played 33 minutes. for the Pistons. Had probably the worst possible matchup, going against Kyle Lowry on opening night, but they're home here against Orlando Magic. So I think he's a guy that's interesting for tournaments. Then Darren Williams as well, 6.4K gets. I mean, that's got to be the best matchup in the NBA going against the Rockets. So there is a lot to like, and that's why I think it's not a night where you absolutely have to pay up for Westbrook. There's going to be a lot of occasions this season where you're going to have to absolutely find a way to pay up for Russell Westbrook. But at this point, I'm not sure tonight's that night.
Kind of with you on that. Kind of initial build, just saving that, even 3K from Westbrook to Curry. It really, 3K gives you a huge upgrade in a position here. So, you do the 2v2s and you've got Westbrook and a 3K crapper, or you've got, Curry and, a middle 6K guy. It's pretty hard.
I mean, here's one. So just one quick example. That would be, you can go like Russell Westbrook and Trevor Ariza, or you can go Curry and Durant. And I know they're on the same team, so that might not be optimal, but that's the kind of upgrade that you get.
It's huge. It's huge. I think that's a great point. The only other thing I want to mention here, I know our projections really like Elfrid Payton price per point. The one thing I did notice about Orlando is they only went 8 deep. All their guys played mid-30s minutes. I probably have a tough I'm probably not looking to go there, except maybe contrarian in a tournament at only 5.9K, just because he does play a lot of minutes, and it should be, I think, a fairly close game between those two teams. But a guy who's going to be on the floor, it seemed like an absolute ton. Everybody in the mid-30s last game. So I love that Scott Skiles is gone, and we actually get a very tight bench there by Frank Vogel, which is beneficial. So let's move on. Shooting guard here. And, we obviously have James Harden at the top, and he didn't disappoint. I mean, he was freaking awesome. 17 assists, I believe it was, in that game. Finished with 64 fantasy points. 7 turnovers are going to happen, which does kind of suck because I think it's a full -1 on FanDuel for turnovers.
Yes.
Is that right? Yep. Yeah, so that stings a little bit much there, but 8 boards, 17 assists. Again, only 1 steal and 0 blocks for him, so didn't get any of those, outside ancillary statistics. But another nice matchup for him in Dallas with a total of 220 in this one. I mean, I really like him here because I think shooting guard is a bit weaker than we have at point guard. And that's why I think if I'm choosing between Harden or Westbrook right now, I think I'm going to Harden. I just see better options at point guard.
Yeah, I think the options, the value options at point guard are better and safer. So, the way it's looking right now is, you might want to lock in 2 of those cheaper point guards, and Harden could be the spend. I mean, shooting guard is a position that typically has a lot of volatility. I mean, we saw on Wednesday night, Devin Booker was kind of like the chalk option. I was hesitant on the play. I did end up playing him. I mean, I think I was like the one guy that was against it all day, and then I started building my lineups. Like, he just like fits in there so perfect. But kind of what I feared came to fruition. Didn't really get many peripheral statistics. 3 rebounds, 2 assists. More of a scoring dependent guy. But 1 game sample size, I mean, it could be a better spot from here. But as it stands, James Harden clearly the top option at this position. And there's a few mid to low tier guys that I do have some interest in. But shooting guard is a volatile position as always.
Yeah, and I think the one guy that is going to be very popular tonight's Rodney Hood going against the Lakers. I don't know about the Lakers' pace. I think they certainly ended up winning that game against Houston in the opener, but they also played very, very deep on their bench. That game's got a total of 201 here, but Hood obviously picked up a ton of scoring in that opener, and at under 6K, I think he's interesting. What do we think of Klay Thompson here? Another guy whose salary is dirt cheap at 6-1 on FanDuel. Only took 13 shots last game. I think we're in the same wavelength here of I think that we're going to see Golden State really just come out and just really show everybody, hey, we're legit. That was a tough team that we lost to. Maybe we had opening night jitters. I expect a great effort from them. Can we trust Klay, though? I mean, 6,100 is a really low salary for that guy.
For me, it's just going to be tournaments for this guy from probably here on out. I mean, it looks, and this was kind of my prediction going in, that he's going to be the odd man out in this offense. Draymond Green still, kept a similar role. Curry still similar role, but I think he's the guy that takes the biggest hit here with Durant in town. So I can't play him. I mean, I think there's going to be some nights where he absolutely goes off, gets hot from behind the arc, which is great for tournaments. But I mean, the floor I think is pretty low. And we saw that game one. I think a guy that's going to be pretty popular in this price range is going to be Monta Ellis, 6.1K. The one thing that kind of is holding me back from him is the fact that they have 5 legitimate scorers, in that starting lineup. I mean, every single guy in that lineup can get it done on the offensive end of the court. So I think he's going to be popular, but for me, I'm probably going to pass for that reason. I mean, they had the monster performance, and that did include overtime too. So there's a little boost there to the production. But yeah, I'm not really sold on anything in this range. Under 7K, like between 7 and 6K, I'm not sold on a ton.
Yeah, and Ellis, 7 for 11, 7 boards, 7 assists, 3 steals. Yeah. I mean, everything went his way. I mean,
yes.
And it was his birthday, too. So he had a whole birthday narrative going. So, of course, he had a good game. But I'm with you. Like, I just don't know if that's where I want to go. And then we got the Knight and Booker situation, which nobody was over, I think, 30 minutes on those guys. So that's, kind of dicey. It might be, let's go talk about Evan Fournier here. I already mentioned the minutes. I think he was one of the high watermarks for that opening night. 39 minutes for him, and I love the fact that he jacked up 19 shots that day. That's a good sign because there's they don't have a whole lot of shooters on there. A whole lot of guys who create their own offense. Ibaka, Aaron Gordon. Even Peyton, like these guys, they're not guys who will try and get aggressive offensively. And Fournier, I think, showed that he will, and he's still 5,800. Again, low total game, low pace game, but somewhat intriguing for what we saw in that opener.
Yeah, if he's gonna be jacking up 19 shots, I mean, at shooting guard position, he's a guy that might be pretty popular. From here on out. And, the Magic did not look good. They kind of looked out of whack. And, there was points in that game. I watched a good chunk of it where like the entire offense was essentially running through him. And like you said, they don't have guys that can really go and get it on the scoring end. And he's one guy that can. 19 shots, 5.8K. I think, I have some interest there. Like I said, not a huge total game, but, it's fine. As long
it's
as
just a tough position.
Yeah, it's a tough position. There's a couple other guys in this range I think that are interesting. You mentioned Hood. I think he'll probably be the most popular, at this position. I think Eric Gordon, interesting. I mean, he had a big role there for the Rockets. Took a lot of shots, scored 19 points, 15 field goal attempts. Interesting at 5.2K. And then I think Wesley Matthews we can consider too. Gets the boost going against the Rockets, 220 total, basically a pick 'em there. And, he's a guy that will shoot it a lot too, 5.1K. So, we're looking for 23 points kind of.
Yeah, and look at that game from him too, 3 for 16. So, boy, he couldn't hit jack squat. No. Still had 28 fantasy points because he's pretty consistent in those other categories, 5, 3, and 3 in rebounds, assists, and steals. So, if he goes 7 for 16, you're looking mid-30s, potentially 40s if he makes some three-pointers. So good call on Wesley Matthews, 5,100 on him. All right, let's move on to small forward here. And clearly the spend guys, you've got LeBron, you've got Durant. Durant looked just fine in that role. But again, this is another, we've got all these pricey guys. There's only so many we can take, and we still haven't touched on Anthony Davis, at the power forward position. I mean, what's your feeling here? If you were going to pick one of those two guys, who do you prefer, Durant or LeBron, or does it really not matter?
I'm gonna take. I guess I'll take the $600 discount, but in terms of projections, super similar. I mean, definitely similar. I mean, if you have a strong lean one way or another, I mean, just roll with it. If the $600 dropping from LeBron to Durant gets you a pretty substantial upgrade, go there. I mean, it's a toss-up. I mean, they finished just about the same on Wednesday night. I mean, just very similar. But like you said, Durant looked totally fine in that offense. I think his rebounding numbers will continue to be up in that offense too. So that's one thing that I like. I think, we saw 10 rebounds. What he had 10, right? Yeah, 10 rebounds last game. I think he continues to grab similar number of rebounds. So I like him at 9.3K, and that's probably a little bit too cheap for him.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, he did take, 18 shots sounds good, but that still feels almost low for him.
Yeah.
I think he can still see into the mid-20s in shots. And if he's going to board for 10, he's going to get you some assists and steals and blocks. I mean, his defense last season, especially in the playoffs, he became like a rim protector. And, if he can get, 2 blocks a game, that would be huge for his fantasy.
Yeah, and the Warriors obviously disappointing, game one, but the few times it actually did look good was when Durant got the ball and they ran plays for him. So I think, we'll see a lot more of that tonight moving forward.
Let's talk about some other guys here and, maybe the value side of things because, the middle tier, there's not really much of a middle tier here on FanDuel at small forward. Bojan Bogdanovic last game was the starter out there in small forward, and he kind of took advantage of it with Randy Foye out. We'll obviously have to wait on that status for him. It looks like he's questionable for today's game, but if Bogdanovic would draw the start again, I'd be willing to go there. I mean, it was only 23 minutes that he played, but he jacked up 17 shots in 23 minutes.
Yeah, that's a big time number. And they just don't have the offensive option. So I think this is something that we can count on continuing to see. I mean, like you said, that's big. 23 minutes, and he managed to get up 17 shots. That's impressive. That's a big number there, 4.2K, as long as he's in there. Small forward, again, pretty weak position. I mean, unless you're paying up at the top, which I think is viable. But if you're going down, 4.2K, it's going to be tough to beat, especially a guy that's shooting the ball. Shooting the ball that many times.
Yeah, we were on Aaron Gordon last week, and on the opening night for the Magic. He was fine. I don't know if I love him today at 5'6", because at that same number we got Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, who admittedly I kind of laughed at. I think Big T or maybe somebody brought him up last game or last podcast, and I kind of laughed it off. Like he had one of the biggest nights of certainly from a value standpoint. 43 fantasy points, 23 and 14 is what he put up. What do we think of Kidd-Gilchrist here in this matchup versus Miami? Still cheap, but are we going to see that production again, or was that an anomaly?
I don't know. I mean, that was a big time performance. I mean, I guess it could be fluky, but it's hard to imagine he goes from like 23 and 14 to like hurting you at 5.6K. Just hard for me to imagine that. I'm fine with him. I'm fine with him in this range. If you're in this range, I like him. I think Marcus Morris is a fine option. I mean, the minutes are going to continue to be there. I mean, just probably a lock to play, 32, 33 minutes. And Aaron Gordon, I'm fine with too. I mean, he got the job done at his price point on opening night and played the 35 minutes. So I think that's something we're going to continue to see. So I like all three of those guys if you're in this price range. And then Joe Johnson. Yeah, we didn't even talk about him. What's up with that?
I'm not chasing the Joe Johnson game.
No, I don't think that's the one guy I'd probably not chase on, but
he went 12 for 16. Like, think about that for a second. He went 12 for 16. Yeah. Joe Johnson doesn't go 12 for 16. No. He's usually like a 5 for 16 shooter most times.
Yeah, that was a crazy performance. So I think that was more of a fraud than Michael Kidd-Gilchrist.
Yeah, and even Barnes, again, getting back to that Dallas-Houston game, he was a guy who wasn't horrible in that opener. 27 fantasy points, 14 shots in 34 minutes, 9 rebounds, and didn't give you an assist, steal, or block. So again, another guy who basically zeroed out those 3 statistical categories, which isn't going to happen more times than not. And nearly still got you 30 fantasy points, which is almost 6x on that salary. So I think he's intriguing. Morris, I was looking at his numbers too. You mentioned him, and I hadn't thought about him much, but he's another guy who chucked it a good bit in that opener. 17 shots in 31 minutes. It seems like a lot for him. And I'm a little curious, though, how this goes tonight in that game, because we also had Andre Drummond get into foul trouble early in that game, and I think it changed up, maybe some of the dynamics of that offense. So we'll get to Drummond here in just a minute. not. I mean, I'm not really into Paul George against Brooklyn here at 9,200. I'd much rather have Durant or LeBron. Justice Winslow. Let's talk about him real quick. He gets a date with Charlotte, and not a guy that was on very many radars to open up the season, but hell of an opening night. 34 fantasy points.
Yeah, looked good. I mean, just an aggressive player, and finally going to get the minutes on this team. 34 minutes, contributed across the board. He looked pretty good. Another guy, Deion Waiters. Yeah, we didn't talk about him at shooting guard, but he played a ton and kind of had some ball handling responsibilities too. Played 34 minutes. He had 9, 6, and 4. We didn't talk about him, but he's only 4.5K. So, we got to see where the value is going to come from in these Miami guys, because obviously they lost quite a few big pieces. But Justice Winslow is a very interesting guy to me. Because we saw it in the past. When he was given time, he's capable of having good performances where he kind of contributes all across the board. And we saw that game 1. So this could be a guy that, the price goes up and we might be paying a little bit more money for moving forward.
All right, let's get to power forward here, and we'll start with Anthony Davis, who after putting up 90 fantasy points, his salary, I don't even know if it went up, did it? I mean, come on. Literally one of the best fantasy games I have ever seen by a player. Let's go through this. 50 points, 16 boards, 5 assists would be fabulous. Then you had 7 steals and 4 blocks and only 3 turnovers. Took 34 shots in 41 minutes. Anthony Davis, man, what a game that was. And now you know what's going to happen here, Hoop. Everybody's going to roster Anthony Davis, but it's hard not to. It's a pace-up game versus Golden State.
At home,
also they're going to give the ball to.
Yeah, they don't have the options. I mean, the usage rate is going to continue to be absolutely insane. You throw in the blocks and the steals, and he's going to be popular. I mean, he's definitely going to be popular tonight, but it's hard because there's a lot of really good plays. I mean, the top 3 plays, obviously Westbrook, Curry, and him, but then you throw in guys like Curry that are underpriced. We talked about Durant, 9.3K. So roster build is going to be extremely, extremely difficult tonight. You're going to be making some pretty, pretty big fades. There's just no other way around it. And on my initial build, I think we're kind of in the same boat. You're really probably going to have to pick one of these guys to pay up for, which is super unfortunate. Hopefully the schedule will start staggering a little bit, because I don't want to make these decisions every single night.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think you might be able to fit 2 in. I don't know. I'm trying to do that right now. It's tough. But Davis, looking at his history last season versus the Warriors, 22-12, 26-15. And then had a 18 and 6 games. So 51, 41, and 29, his fantasy outputs. The 3 games prior to that, the year before, 50, 60, 56. So he's been at 50 or more in, looks like 4 of his last 6 against Golden State. And it's just if you watch that game, though, man, everything was going through him. It's that was it. And it makes sense because that team is really bad. They don't really have anybody else who can do anything. And I don't think it's going to change.
Yeah, I was going to say the Warriors don't really have anyone that's going to be able to match up with him either. I mean, Draymond Green, there's just no chance. So it's a good spot here. Great spot.
Yeah. So we certainly like him. Let's look at some other options for us here at power forward. Let's see. We still got Serge Ibaka priced up a little bit, 600 higher than last game. At 5,500, I still think he's in play based on the minutes we saw, and that he did get in a little bit of foul trouble early on. And I know everybody was tilting and panicked, including us. But when it was all said and done, 24 fantasy points and 6 of 17 shooting. That's pretty aggressive there with the shot in that opening game. I think more times than not, he's probably going to go maybe 9 for 17. So looks like 30 fantasy points is very much on the horizon. And if he has those big block games, which he doesn't have nearly as much as he used to, there's still some upside for him at that price.
Yeah, 5.5, I think that's good. I mean, the main thing you pointed out is the shot attempts, and we kind of touched on that during the first podcast was, they were talking about running portions of the offense through this guy, and that kind of, came true in this first game. 17 shots is big. He's a guy that's I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but I can't imagine he averaged anywhere close to that in the past with the Thunder. So this is going to be a big boost for him offensively. The rebound numbers will be there. The block upside doesn't appear to be what it once was, but still capable of racking up some blocks. So 5.5K seems just a little bit too cheap for him still.
Give me another name or two that you like, because power forward's kind of thin. I've got a guy I've got my eye on, but I'm going to give you a couple. Or have you give me a couple?
One guy I like moving forward, not tonight, is Kevin Love. For a couple reasons. He looked good again in that opening game, was against the Knicks, but the one thing that I liked even more than that was the playing time, the rotations. He had a lot of time on that court without LeBron James, without Kyrie Irving, and that is super valuable. They were trying to feature him in that offense. They were trying to get him some looks offensively. So moving forward, I think he's going to be very interesting, and 7.1K is a little bit too cheap. Don't love the matchup there with Toronto, but he's a guy to keep an eye on moving forward. Some other names that I like, Enes Kanter had that big game, and basically he's going to be he was out there doing whatever he wanted basically with that second unit, and that's going to be the case. They just don't have the guys offensively. He had a monster performance. Started out super slow too, and then just absolutely turned it on. So 5.3K is too cheap for him. Marvin Williams had a pretty big role there in Charlotte. He played 29 minutes, 13 and 10. I think he's in play. Trevor Booker's an interesting name here. He's 4.9K playing for the Nets, obviously a terrible team, but in 24 minutes, he managed to get 8.7 rebounds and 5 assists. They basically just gave up on their starting unit in that game one. They were getting blown out, and they just went to the bench. The bench played well, and they just rolled with those guys. So these starters did not have the opportunity to do much. But, I think he's interesting at 4.9K. So I think there's some good options in that mid-tier there.
Yeah, I think Kanter is the guy that really stands out for me because, Sabonis started, but he only played, I think, 15 minutes in that game. Kanter's the guy who you talked about has to be the offensive player in that second unit. And I think, we're going to see even more minutes from him kind of moving forward. And I almost hope that they don't put him into the starting lineup because I just think he kind of works better in that capacity. And that team is just so thin from kind of top to bottom in terms of playmakers outside of Westbrook that they need somebody, and it just might be him. Yeah. Let's see here. Other names. Man, there's not a whole lot that stands out for me. One guy, keep your eye on him. He actually had a really good preseason, and I played him a little bit in the opening night, and I probably, overestimated it. But I think this Marquise Chris from the Suns is actually really, really decent player. Didn't put up big numbers in that opener. He's cheap at 4,100. We don't want to play him really in daily right now, but man, he's a guy who I think if there's an injury or two that happens, he could be very, very useful for us, but probably not, especially based on what that team appears to be doing with minutes right now, and it's not something we like. Do you have any interest in Trey Lyles if we get another inactive or another out for Favors? I know he burned us last game.
Yeah, it sounds like Favors is more on the probable side, which I hope is the case because I don't want to consider Trey Lyles again. Yeah. He only played 18 minutes. Didn't look very good in those 18 minutes, so probably off him regardless. Let's just hope Favors plays and we don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. All right, let's get to the center position, wrap this sucker up for today. And, the top price per dollar guy, when you look at the Roto-Grinders projections for today, I never thought I'd see this, but it's Roy Hibbert. And you're probably like, Roy Hibbert? Well, Hibbert last game played 31 minutes, gave you 38 fantasy points, and has a salary under 4K tonight. My question to you is, how much of a fraud was that by Roy Hibbert last game, or is he in play for us at a bargain basement price with some studs out there? What do you think?
Somebody mentioned Hibbert to me that week one, and I just started laughing. Said, I'm not a chance in hell I'm playing Roy Hibbert. If he's going to play 32 minutes, which was the case in that first game, he's a guy you have to consider, unfortunately. 32 minutes for Roy Hibbert. He's a guy, we've never seen him play that much. And honestly, if they continue to play him that much moving forward, he's an absolute stone lock to get injured. There's just no doubt about that. But for now, 32 minutes, 3.9K. damn it. I mean, Hibbert's a guy we have to consider, and I don't ever want to admit that.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like, I feel dirty putting him
Yes.
into my lineup. But let's look into that box score a little bit here. And I do think there's some anomalies, including 5 blocks for him, which, yeah, he's like 7'2" or whatever. Like, yeah, he can block shots. But especially in this matchup going against Hassan Whiteside, I don't know if the block shots are going to be there, certainly to that magnitude. Also, 6 for 9 from the field, didn't miss a free throw, 3 assists. I mean, it just kind of felt like everything came into place with him in that game. And, at 3,900, we don't need to get 38 fantasy points.
Well, that's the whole thing. We're talking at 3,900. We're talking we need how many did he get last game?
He got 38.
So he gets half of that. He hits value.
True, but I do think there's also a chance that we get Roy Hibbert that gives us like 9 fantasy points.
100%, 100%. There's no doubt. It's a super risky play, but he's 3.9K. He's a punt. I mean, he's a full punt. So
yeah, I think he's a great tournament play if you want to stack up the top dogs. I just can't do it in cash for a guy like him. But let's talk about some of these other guys, because there are other players which I think have a little bit more solid roles that aren't that much more expensive potentially. And the one guy is Steven Adams again. We saw him in that opening game play. Pretty much kind of gave us the line that we expected, 16 points, maybe even a little low on rebounds at only 5. But another guy, 16 shots, made 7 of them. That's about on par with what you'd expect. 27 fantasy points. I mean, it's a solid day.
36 minutes played, a lot working in his favor. Probably the safest option at the position. And the price is nice at 4.7K. I just don't – if he's going to play 36 minutes, I don't see how he really burns you. Obviously, it's possible, but I just don't think the probability of him burning you at 4.7K is anywhere close to being high. So I think a very safe option.
There's a lot. Capella's another interesting kind of punt option as well, 4.7 if you want to go there in that high total game. A little less in the minutes than you'd like to see. And they have Nene, who I think is a guy who they're going to kind of go to late in games. I feel like he's more the veteran presence, brings more offensively to the table than Capella does. But in the right scenario, he's not the worst play, but it's hard to take him over Steven Adams. Let's talk about some of these other guys that are interesting to me, and I'm going to go with Andre Drummond here. Basically, I'm glad that they had a tough matchup because nobody's a bigger Andre Drummond fan than me. And, he basically, stunk up the joint in terms of foul trouble, and that's been his biggest problem. Only played 24 minutes, finished with 21 fantasy points, but he's a guy now against the Orlando Magic and Nikola Vucevic who I absolutely love. Look at this history for him. 13-16, 30-14, 17-12, 26-17, 17-22. That's 5 of his last 6 games against Orlando. So he's been 56, 56, 31, 34, 51, 41. That is a solid output for a guy who's kind of in the 7s here, which, it's going to be tough to crack in cash always. But if you want to go fair and balanced and differentiate, I love Andre Drummond tonight in that capacity.
Yeah, if you're playing the balanced approach lineup, you definitely want him in there. Just a classic bounce back spot. Stunk it up, foul trouble game 1, coming back game 2 in a really good matchup that he's exploited in the past, has a very nice price tag. And if you're building tournaments, I think this is definitely a guy to get some exposure to.
Miles Turner, are we a believer, or what do we think? I mean, he was the guy you wanted at center in the first big slate that we had.
Yeah, I think definitely 6.9K here, coming off a 61 fantasy point performance. I mean, the one hesitation I have here with these guys is, like I said earlier, the Pacers. Every one of their guys is a capable offensive player in that starting lineup. So I think that's the one drawback here. And they did get overtime, so that bumped up these stats a little bit. But I like him. A guy I love a ton is Valanciunas, even in this matchup. I mean, not the greatest matchup against the Cavaliers, but they have nobody to really back this guy up. And I think we touched on it in the podcast or on Grinders Lab, but he played 35 minutes.
Yeah.
And he's going to continue to play those minutes. They just don't have the backups. I mean, a guy that hasn't averaged more than 26 minutes per game in his career. That's going to change this year. 6.6K. Yeah, 6K on the nose. Nice. Way too cheap for him. I honestly think as the season goes on, he's a guy, his price range is going to be up towards probably the 8K range.
Yeah, I think again, we don't need what we got last game, 47 or 45 fantasy points there. And again, peeking into that box score, the 10 for 15 doesn't bother me from the field. I think that's attainable for him for where he's shooting from. But 12 for 14 free throw attempts for him. I think that is a little bit more than or way more than we're going to see more often than not. But again, no blocks, no steals, 11 boards. I think, for him to go, 5X here, very, very realistic. I think that's a great guy to point out there. Rudy Gobert at 7K versus the Lakers, another guy that was okay in the opener. He wasn't, I know a lot of people were expecting more from him, but 12 and 14, gave you 2 blocks. He's still fairly affordable there at 7K. And, Turner versus Gobert, if you had to choose one, which one you want?
Oh man, that's a tough one. I'll probably take Turner. I mean, I guess if Favors is out, it makes it a little bit closer. I mean, he played 41 minutes last game with Favors out. Gobert did. So if Favors is out, I'd probably lean Gobert, but I think early indications are that Favors is going to play. So I'll take Turner.
All right, I'm close on that one.
That's a tough call there.
That's a tough. I don't think definitively you can argue one way or another. But all right, that's our look at the slate today in the NBA. Certainly, good luck over there on FanDuel again tonight. Be sure to check us out on Grinders Live all day long. We've got a ton of content for you. Remember, if you haven't tried our premium content, if you haven't tried incentives, we've got a 7-day free trial, which is awesome. You can basically go in and test it out for a full week. And if you time it up right, you get yourself actually, you don't even have to. You get yourself NFL content, you get NBA content, you get NHL content. And then after 7 days, you can say, hey, it was worth it. Or, you know what? Not using it enough, but give it a chance. Included in that, we're going to have some premium videos as well, including for football, cash game, GPP builds on FanDuel and DraftKings. And about 3 times a week, we're going to be having roundtables as well for hoops, including today. So be on the lookout for those to hit probably about 1-2 Eastern time. But tons of great content, and I hope you guys give our premium a chance. See if it can help you become a better daily fantasy player. Hoop, good luck to you, man, and good luck this NFL season. Hopefully you hit on your tight end and quarterback and RB too.
Yeah, hopefully I need this chalk train to keep on heading down the right path. So.
All right. Thanks so much for listening. Make sure to subscribe to us over there in iTunes, and we'll be back next week talking more daily fantasy on the RotoGrinders Daily Fantasy Fix. Till then, we will see ya.